All right, Dr. Tamu Green. One of my favorite parts of asking people for years, I've loved this, and because influencers come sometimes in a second, or they sometimes come your lifetime, and sometimes it hits, and sometimes it hits later, whatever. But can you share with us 2 or 3 people that have been influencers in your life?
Yes, I mean, the person that just comes immediately to mind is my mother.
Shocking.
It's shocking, right? So Catherine Hall Trujillo, former founder and director of Birthing Project USA. I actually remember being 15 years old. I was in high school, freshman in high school, and we had some kind of assignment in my English class, and I wrote a recipe about my mom, and it was like, I don't know, 3 cups of enthusiasm and whatever, a half a cup of laughter, whatever it was. I did this whole recipe of her. So even back then, I saw her as being really larger than life, this tiny little woman being larger than life, and really inspiring me around what you can do.
Right.
She's a Black woman. And so in our society, that is the lowest caste that we have. And there is so much about her past, about her, that would have potentially kind of stopped her in her tracks. And it didn't. Instead, I think that she's kind of the quintessential, that expression of like, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so that's what I had as my role model the entire time that I was growing up, was someone who was like just determined and going to go out there and change the system, and just unabashedly so, that we're going to do the thing that's right, regardless of how much pushback we get. It's Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and the school doesn't celebrate it, and the government doesn't accept it. But you know what? I'm pulling you out of school, and we're going to go on vacation, and we're going to march in the streets, whatever it is.
You might say that she literally and figuratively gave life to a lot of things.
This is absolutely true. And I know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people around the world who consider her their mom. They call her Mama Cat, right? Right? And so there was all of that. But then I also saw her create this organization. So she had been working for the state, the Department of Health in California, and she was very disappointed with our leadership and what the leadership was doing and what they weren't willing to do, for Black women and their babies. And so she just took it upon herself. Well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start this nonprofit organization, and I'm going to do it. And just the things that I've seen around essentially community organizing and capacity building and creating an inclusive space, and how do you advocate and push forward policies that make sense. I've just been able to watch that over so many years, the special touches, the relationships being at the crux of everything, acknowledging people. She will see the most kind of invisible person in the room and make sure that she acknowledges them and thanks them for what it is that they're doing. And I just feel like that's at the heart quite often of the work that I'm doing in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And so to have that role modeling for me over all these years has just been wonderful.
No, I can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who else?
Well, there's also John A. Powell. Are you familiar with him?
No.
Yeah, so he is the director of the Othering and Belonging Institute at University of California, Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this research institute that brings together scholars and community advocates, communicators and policymakers. And what they're really looking at is what are the barriers to an inclusive, just, and sustainable society, and how can we overcome those barriers? And I just love that. And his trajectory has also just been really interesting, and in terms of the places where he's worked, and he's been really global. He's worked in Africa and India, and he's really done a deep dive into implicit bias and has built a lot of research around implicit bias and in institutes. He was at the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at Ohio State University, and they published, really interesting reports and documents that I use in my work still around implicit bias, to really help people understand how it shows up in the really tangible, meaningful ways that it shows up and shapes our lives, in terms of access to housing and education and all of that. And he just has this joyful spirit about him. He's so personable. He's just like, you meet him on the street and you sit down and have coffee with him, and
just that alone,
yeah,
feel good.
Yeah, someone who's going to make you feel good and like embody this thing that he's trying to do, which is create a society where all of us feel this sense of belonging and no one has to feel like the other.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, puts on these big conferences that people, are able to come to, and just lots of policy papers, and meeting with people who have very different political ideologies, and like crossing that divide and figuring out how to cross that divide, which I think is so incredibly important, that we get out of our echo chambers. So that's one of the things that I really love about John Powell.
Yeah, who wouldn't love that, actually? Well, you hope.
Yeah.
All right, last one, if you got one. I know there's many, but.
Well, I mean, they're Auntie Maxine. I just feel like when you look at folks who are doing great things in politics, like that you just bow down to. When I look at Holly Mitchell, that there are some women out there who have just been movers and shakers, and and essentially like create the space for the rest of us to come in behind, that they're willing to fight the good fight so that we can come up behind and do our work. Yeah.
I agree with you. I had some women bosses and leaders early in my career, and I can tell you some stories that they had to go through too, but really, really impressed me and learned a lot from them. So, it's interesting, to close on this, is that one thing it should tell us is that we're influencing people all the time also, and sometimes knowingly, sometimes not. So we should be keeping that in mind, and a little kindness goes a long way also, like Mr. Powell talked about. So
true. You never know what you're doing that is having some kind of influence on someone else's life. You never know. Someone just whispered to me the other day, I was really grateful to receive this big award from the Sacramento Business Journal for the work that I'm doing in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when I came into the luncheon the other day, and someone kind of took me aside and whispered in my ear, I have to give you a call because you've really changed my life. And I didn't know that. I had no idea. And so it's like, oh, okay, call me, tell me what this is about.
But it's true. It happens a lot. So thanks for doing that to so many people, or giving that to so many people, including me. And I really appreciate you sharing, who's been some of your influencers in your life. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark.